comparison for thumping it and inviting my imagination to take off. Ken and Evelyn Ottaway were warmly hospitable when we visited Spyglass, their tower house home. Thank you for loaning it to me for my story. Ken gave me a shark's tooth he found on the beach, and that too took its place in a scene. Sloop Point Plantation across on the mainland was a delight to visit. James and May Graves had restored it with love and meticulous respect for the original house. It had been designated as the oldest plantation house in the state. In my novel, it has become Gull's Cove, and the people who live there bear no resemblance to the far more gracious hosts at Sloop Point. When I'm doing research for a book, I always take a great many pictures, both still and video, so I was able to recreate bits of Sloop Point for several scenes. I want to thank Ralph and Betty Shipton, whose beautiful, modern house across the Sound from Topsail we were able to visit. I'm especially grateful for the use of the Shiptons' elevator. I don't know what Captain Nick would have done without it. The manager and staff of the handsome Soundside restaurant were especially helpful, inviting us in during off hours to take pictures. Thus my characters could dine in accurate surroundings. Strangely, I feel closer to Topsail now than I did when we were there. After all, I have spent many months on the island watching my characters work out their various destinies. It will remain forever real in my memory, and as it existed in this story. Hampstead, North Carolina. She must be stopped from coming here. We must stop her. We don't want her here, Rice. Louise Trench, a woman obviously accustomed to getting what she wanted, spoke across the room to her husband. Rice Trench wished that his father's money didn't matter so much to Louise, but he had always known that it would. In her mid-50s, she was still beautiful, and all too well aware of the fact. Her hair had been kept carefully blonde, and her face was still smooth, as though all strong emotion had been suppressed. She had never grown fat, and her figure was perfect in her expensive, well-cut clothes. Rice, too clever for self-deception, had known why she'd married him, but her beauty had captured him from the first, and he'd been lonely since Ellen's death. The three people in the long living room at Gull's Cove stood apart, but they were all looking out a window toward the beautiful rippling water of the Sound. Richard Merrick, the Trench attorney and friend, turned to pick up Louise's words.
It's too late to stop her. Mrs. Knight received my letter, and her plane from California is due to land in Wilmington in a few hours.
At least she can be discouraged from staying, Louise insisted. We need a plan.
My father is dying, Rice said, and he's the one she's coming to see. She won't be here long. He just wants to talk to her about Susan.
Rice still looked devastated whenever he spoke his daughter's name. He knew she was dead. He had felt the loss of her from the first, though it was something his father, Nicholas, had never accepted. The tie between Nick and his granddaughter had been unusually close, and throughout Nick's recent long illness he had spent thousands of dollars to find out why she had disappeared. Sending for Hallie Knight, his granddaughter's oldest friend, was nothing more than a foolish last attempt, but perhaps the most threatening in Louise's eyes.
"Nick will live forever," she said tartly.
"I hope that's true," Richard said, picking up his raincoat and briefcase.
"In any case, I'd better get started for the airport. I'll phone you after I've delivered Mrs. Knight to the island."
Rice was aware of the look in his wife's eyes, the way she smiled at Richard. He'd seen that look before, whenever a handsome man was in her vicinity, and as always he held his anger deep inside. Louise couldn't help the way she was. She needed to be admired, but he knew she would never leave him as long as she had the lure of his father's inheritance, his father's money. Richard paused on his way to the door.
"There may be nothing to worry about. She may not accept Nick's terms."
"How did she sound on the phone when she called in answer to your letter?" Louise asked.
"Curious, puzzled, nothing more. I had the feeling that she was distracted by some difficult private matter. She's only coming because of her friendship with Susan."
"If you play your cards right, Richard, you can scare her off. Why, that awful house Nick lives in should be enough to do the trick." Louise shuddered.